Hello and welcome to On the Record, a debate-style television talk show where Bahamians will find the balanced, true and open debate they've been looking for. To be arrested or not, handcuffed or without, those are the arguments that have become hot-button issues. After investigations, several former government officials who allegedly ran afoul of the law were recently arrested and brought before the courts, accused of several counts of bribery, extortion and misconduct. Kenrick Dorset, former Minister of Environment, Frank Smith, former chairman of the Public Hospitals Authority, and more recently, Shane Gibson, former Minister of Labour and Housing, all publicly hauled before the courts. A public divided over the issue. Some support the public shaming, while others are very angry with government and police over what they feel is the inhumane treatment towards those who served in high public office. Should these honourable gentlemen be treated the same way as a regular Joe Blow charged before the court, or should they be handled with kid gloves? We will take a look at that and other issues tonight as we discuss our very timely topic, arrest to arraignment, procedure and protocols. Our guests are noted attorney Wayne Monroe QC, who was the PLP's candidate for the Freetown constituency in the last general elections, and Maria Daxon, an attorney, human rights advocate and former police officer who was also accused of running afoul of the law herself and then cleared and arrested in the process. It's all on the record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Our discussion begins on the other side of this break.
On the Record is brought to you by Alive, the nation's newest and best LTE network.
Good to be alive.
Light it up. No one does summer like we do. It's just a way of life. Light it up.
Time is now. We own summer. We are alive.
What are you doing?
Calling the bank to order more checks.
Go to epbahamas.com and order your checks from Executive Printers.
Executive Printers. We're the authority in business and personal check printing in the Bahamas. Come in and see one of our specialists or visit us online at epbahamas.com to design and order your checks today.
Welcome back to On the Record. Arrest to arraignment, procedures and protocols is our topic for discussion tonight. Our guest for the first segment is attorney Maria Daxon, who is a human rights activist and a former police officer who was accused of libel and defamation. She was eventually cleared as her accusers never showed up for court. We're going to discuss the process she went through with her very own colleagues who had to arrest her and take her to court. Maria, welcome to On the Record. Good to have you here tonight.
Welcome, Jerome.
Want to talk first about your experience and what led to this arrest and the series of events that followed.
Okay, I was arrested sometime last year. According to the police, they called me and told me that Assistant Commissioner Leon Bethel and the now Commissioner of Police, Ellison Greenslade, made a complaint to say I defamed them. Now, what was happening, Jerome, was that I started to represent a lot of police officers whose constitutional rights were being violated by senior members of the Royal Bahamas Police Force. Not all, Jerome. It's about 6 of them. The officers then started to complain that they were working these private engagements. They were not getting their money, and it was taking them a very long time to get their money. I had an opportunity to speak to Mr. Dwight Smith, who was in charge of the Police Staff Association. As a result, he said, yes, Ms. Daxon, some of these police officers complained that they were not getting their funds. So I started to write letters, and then I went on Facebook and I was like, listen, if the officers don't work, pay them their money. Somebody in police headquarters is taking the monies and not paying the police officers their money. And they got upset. They was like, okay. Then they decided that they didn't want me to be speaking about it. They never did no investigation. The Commissioner of Police and Leon Bell decided that they was going to arrest me or have me arrested. When I went to CDU with my attorney, they told me, Ms. Daxon, you are under arrest for this and this. I was like, okay, no problem. Went in to the interview. They were very professional. The only issue that my attorney had was that where is the complaints from the Commissioner Greenslade and Leon Bethel? The investigating officer refused to answer my attorney.
So never saying to you what the complaint was or producing the actual complaint?
Right. They said to me what the complaint was,
okay,
but no statement was ever produced. We went through the interview, and one of the main questions was, who in the Royal Bahamas Police Force were giving you all this information? They wanted me to tell them who I got this information from. I said, I'm not going to answer that question. That one, I'm not going to answer that question.
So then what happened?
After that, they had me to Cable Beach Station. I have asthma. I told them I couldn't stay in the station. They told me that they got instruction from the boss to put me in the cell. I had problems breathing, everything. The following morning, they had to take me to the hospital. Mm-hmm. That same day, they decided to arraign me. They handcuffed me. Jerome, it was a bad experience. These were officers that I worked with in CDU, and they now have to handcuff me. One of the policewomen was practically in tears to see that I had to go through this.
And then you were taken to court to be charged?
Taken to court to be charged, handcuffed, taken to court, got remanded. I was sent to prison. It was a bad experience again. I had to strip when I got to prison. They had to search my private parts and everything. The following morning, I had gotten information that my attorneys then got me to appear in the front of the Supreme Court to get my bail application heard. And Jerome, coming from that prison, I was handcuffed to the legs, the arm, and the stomach. walking into a police station and those officers, them seeing me, they was like, what is going on? I got from Central to the courts, saying to attorneys, them seeing me in this state, they were like shaking their head. It was embarrassing. I spent 25 years there. I was an officer of the court and an attorney at law fighting for people's rights. And I had to encounter and go through that experience.
What were you feeling in those moments? You spent the night now in prison, have to have gone through that. As a former police officer, knowing that you would have helped to put people behind bars, you would have helped to bring people before the courts in this condition. What were you feeling, and what was that experience like for you, for someone who seemingly is a law-abiding citizen?
It was a bad feeling. I did everything that was right according to the law. I love being a police officer, and the experience was horrible. To know that my family members and my co-workers, just looking at some of their faces. But you know what was the worst experience, Jerome? While in Foxhill, a female prison officer came to the cell. She said, "Miss Daxon, how you doing?" She was one of my clients. Not only that, she had another prison officer who was supposed to be in my client also. She had to bring her to show her this was me. This is the lady who I told you, who you spoke to represent you. It was horrible.
When you see or would have seen what has transpired over the last few weeks with these government officials, former government officials who are now going through what you went through last year, how did that make you feel? What did you think at that point?
Really, what should I say? I think that that's a policy that the police have in place. Nobody is above the law. The common man had to go through that. Rodney Munker went through that. The pastor went through that. Randy Frazier went through that. I don't think that there should be no special treatment for nobody in this country. Nobody is above the law. If it's alleged that you committed a crime, alleged, and the police have you in custody, there is a process that they have to go through. And everybody that going to court should get handcuffed. I have no issues with that. I went through it. I have no issues with being handcuffed because you can't trust nobody. As a former police officer going from the station to the courts, anything can happen within that 5 minutes walk from the station to the courts.
You don't think, though, that the crime should necessitate a different procedure? If you are up for defamation, if you are up for bribery, these are not violent offenses. I mean, you seemingly haven't been accused of a violent offense. Are you really a flight risk? Does it really necessitate that kind of action for someone who seemingly isn't charged with a violent offense or is not seemingly a flight risk?
I totally agree with you to the extent that you should do a measuring stick according to the type of crime it is, but the policies has to change. The parliamentary has to change. We just can't change it, Jerome, just because it's happening now to certain so-called politicians. Mm-hmm. No, it makes it look like it's only bias, that it's an issue now that these politicians now have to go through the same things that I went through or the common man went through. And my biggest issue is, Jerome, is that you can't change something to suit a certain class of people in this society. If we get there, that means, God forbid, if you was to get locked up, you looking for special treatment. If the Prime Minister get locked up, he's looking for special treatment. We can't change it just to suit a certain class of people. Let's have a standard where everybody is treated the same way, and that we will be fair in our dealing. We can't seem to be biased. This is a democratic country.
Maria Daxon, thank you for sharing that story with us. We are certainly going to continue this discussion and continue to get more of your experience and your viewpoints on this very topical issue. When we return, we are going to beef up our discussions. Attorney Wayne Monroe will join us. We'll take a break and be back right after this.
Shooting last night claims the life of a young woman.
Providence being urged to evacuate as soon as possible. That story.
Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis weighs in on those reasons.
Inside the huddle, everybody, Al Marcelo.
Force officer behind bars today.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Kyle Joaquin.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2,
1. Get faster internet speeds for free when you get TV, internet, and phone. Ask for Trio from Rev.
Join the revolution.
We are now in a new political era, a new prime minister, government, and opposition. What are the new challenges, and what role will the Bahamian people play in this new era of governance? Join me, your host Jerome Sawyer, each week for On the Record as we examine the latest political news and views. That's On the Record, airing every Thursday at 8 p.m. on cable channel 212. See you then. Welcome back to more On the Record. Tonight we're discussing arrest to arraignment procedures and protocols. Our guests, attorney Wayne Monroe, QC, and Maria Daxon, whose story you would have heard during our first segment in the show. Attorney Monroe, former cabinet ministers, government officials have been arrested, hauled before the courts. What would have, in your estimation, as you were involved, what would have precipitated these actions, and were the proper procedures followed in terms of their questioning and to arraignment?
Well, I can't help with what would have precipitated those actions. We make certain allegations that it is a breach of a right to not be discriminated based on political opinion or affiliation. That is a matter, quite bluntly, that will be tried before the courts, and so I don't think there should be a discussion about the merits of that. Mm-hmm. Let me say from the outset, whether you're a cabinet minister or not is not the issue. Mm-hmm. There's a process of law. The starting point of the process of law from Magna Carta is that you are supposed to be free in your person unless the law permits somebody to interfere with you. And the law does deal with restraint. The law does deal with force. There is a continuum of force that is permitted. The starting point of any investigation is a complaint. The police will get a complaint. You will get some idea of what the complaint is by the questions they ask you and what they tell you you're charged with. The police can lie to you, curiously, by making you believe they have more than they have.
I've seen it on Law and Order. Right?
It is a reality, and there's some case law on it. So that is why you have counsel. You have a right to counsel. That's a starting point. Now, the beginning of this whole thing after the complaint is they will want to engage you at some point. In the case of my clients, the former ministers, they were asked to come into the station, and they did in fact come into the station. My view is you had to burn some of the government gas to come get me if it was me.
Well, I wondered about that.
But that could be held against you when you see how we go along. So the next step now is the arrest. And the arrest is governed by Section 11 of the Procedure Code here. And it says that the police can touch you or confine you. But if you submit by word or deed, then they can't even necessarily touch you or confine you. There's no need for it. So if you run from them, they can run you down and handcuff you. If they tell you come in, you come in, and you say, here I am, here to be questioned. There's no reason to handcuff you because you are submitting by word and conduct. Then they have the right to carry out the investigation, ask you questions. You have a right to answer, not answer, as the case may be. In many instances, the issue then comes, the police seem to think that the law says that they have 48 hours to hold you. That's not what it says. That's a maximum time period in the first instance. But if they charge you, they're to bring you to court as soon as practicable. An issue will arise, though, if you are not charged within the first day. What do they do with you in the evening? And they now seem to have this habit that never was the case when I was called to the bar in 1990. In 1990, commercial crime as it was then would call you in, you would go in, you'd be questioned, they would do all the things that you could affect after they question you, and at the end of the evening they would bail you to go home and to return the next day. Now they determine that they're going to hold everyone in custody. That will raise some issues, and again, this applies whether you're a former cabinet minister, the current prime minister, or just a barefoot fella in the road. When they determine to incarcerate everyone, like my clients from BAIC, the experience was 4 persons put in a cell where there are 2 slabs for sleeping, no bedding. Well, there will be a constitutional issue about the adequacy of that accommodation. The fact that there's no bedding, and the fact that if you have 2 slabs, the cell is designed for only 2 people. If you choose to incarcerate a lot more people, you may then create an obligation to build more holding facilities and in fact to buy bedding and in fact to have them monitored so they could be sanitized and that. For too long, Bahamian people have been putting up with what they call bad treatment, but there's nothing in law that dictates it. So the decision to hold or not may end up being a resource issue if we are correct and the court finds with us that you have to be held in humane conditions, and an overcrowded cell is not a humane condition. The police will then have to decide who is more important to hold over the evening.
So, and this, I guess, really comes to the heart of where I think this discussion is in the public realm. This has been going on for a long time. Yes. You would have experienced it yourself.
Of course.
And as you said, as we went into the
But
break.
Jerome, only some of it. The holding over the evening never used to be the case when I was admitted in 1990.
That for argument's sake, let's say within the past year, you would have been held.
No, I disagree with the past.
In the past 10 years.
So okay, let's say in the past 10 years. Okay, for argument's sake, let's say 10 years. This is coming to force. Why now has it become such a huge issue? And I'm really going to put it out there. Because if ordinary citizens and others like me have gone through this, it has never reached to this level before. I mean, I've heard, in my experience as a journalist, heard complaints about the incarceration process being held, coming to court and individual not being charged because the police didn't provide all the papers, etc. This is an ongoing situation. Yes. Why now has it become such an issue?
Well, the reality of all things legal, and the example I always give people is we used to hang people with a mandatory death penalty until in Bowen Davis the Privy Council, moved by somebody, says that that's not what is to happen. Everything that is precedent making in the law happening for the first time happens for two reasons. The first being that you have a citizen whose right is offended, and two, you have a citizen with the means, ability, and willpower to vindicate their right. I'm not concerned in all of this as a lawyer with the character of my clients, other than it feeds into their likelihood of escaping. So in Ms. Daxon's case, her status as an officer of the court, a police officer, would feed into her status of escaping, because the law does say that you can discriminate if you are charged with a violent crime. Then of course that is a consideration. If you are somebody with no connection to the Bahamas, or fleeting connection, or somebody who could disappear if you ran into the bushes, that's a difference. But the reality of it is we will now be litigating these issues because it's happened to these individuals who have engaged me, and their concern goes beyond the defense of their case. The reality of it is the issues that you will have seen if you check the press being engaged for the BAIC people, what we see is the unnecessary handcuffing, the unnecessary detention overnight in bad situations. That behavior will be vindicated not only for Mr. Dion Smith, but the 8 employees. The unnecessary handcuffing, the unnecessary overnighting, to use an Americanism, the perp walk, parading persons before the cameras, that will be vindicated not only for the former cabinet ministers, but it in fact applies, in my view, in my opinion, to everyone. So the case will set a precedent not just for these individuals, but for everyone. And I told Ken and Shane, the silver lining is, well, the matter is out, the matter will be dealt with, and it will be dealt with not just for you, but for everybody.
When you hear that, what do you think? I mean, why not in your case? Why not others?
Thank you very much. I totally, Mr. Monroe, yes, you have a point, but what is happening, the strong arming came in for the past 5 years with all this handcuffing. They got instructions from somebody in the last 5, 6 years. Not only that, Mr. Monroe, you know me, I used to work in commercial crime. Under the past 5, 6 years, but the staying in custody came underneath the PLP administration. It wasn't the FNM or somebody else administration, you know. We used to let people go when they get charged with fraud, but soon as the last government came in power, they told us, no, y'all don't have that discretion no more. They took it away from the police. So if you get charged, what you need to do, put them in the cell, let them spend the overnight in the cell. There was no exception given. And I could tell you who had made that decision and told us. We was like, this is a fraud matter. They could go home. No, nobody's above the law. And this is what we got from this old administration. So for now it coming in, because you give the police a mandate, all of a sudden now that some people from the PLP is being affected, now is a big issue. But you're always the one who give the police a mandate.
I would disagree on that, because the history of it is this. When I say it happened in the last 10 years, it was all the reaction to crime.
Which was going to be my question. Was this a reaction to what was happening in the wild?
It was what always happens, and which I've been complaining about for the last PLP administration, the last FNM administration, the previous PLP administration, and the 2 Ingram administrations. The reaction to crime is tighten up the Bail Act in this. That's factually incorrect, because the reason that they started this force overnighting is because you saw a move with the changes to the Bail Act. The mandatory keeping in custody started from 2011, when the Bail Act amendment was passed on the 3rd of November. And what it in fact does, and we are contesting some of that, is to say, in cases like Ms. Daxon's, the court can't grant you bail. So somebody in their wisdom decided that any matter that the court can't grant you bail in, the police shan't grant you bail in.
Right.
Now, mind you, the Police Act does not say that. But every time you see crime, the public makes an outcry, and politicians of all color seem to want to play this get tough on crime thing. I have denounced it as foolishness. I describe both past prime ministers as dumb and dumber because of their approach to it. And that is the reality of what it is. And so you look at the Bail Act, and all of this is online for the Bahamian people who have an interest. You can Google Bahamas laws online, you go to the government website, the laws are presented alphabetically, and you through and see the Bail Act and the various amendments.
Interesting.
And so it is a reaction to supposedly crime, but it is contrary to what you will read in the Police Act about the ability to admit to police bail.
We've got to go to a break, but I know you want to get in a comment before we take the break. Go ahead.
Okay. What I'm saying, Mr. Monroe, even though this Bail Act came in 2011, the strong arm only started coming in 2013 because during 2011, while working in the magistrate court, they were giving bails out, even though they used their discretion. But in 2013, one of the magistrates had given another attorney-client bail who...
It was 2014.
Right.
It was right before Edward Barrett's matter.
What happened? The magistrate said, listen, because of the act, and we got instructions, that's what the magistrate said in court, we got instructions to deal with what the law says. We want to give these persons bail for these minor offenses, because it's likely that they would get off. But because of the fact we got a meeting, we got instructions to carry out the law. So, no, the strong arm came on Mr. Monroe for the past 5 to 6 years, and I'm going to stand to that.
We're going to take a quick break in our discussion. When we come back, we will continue here on the Record. Stay with us. We are back right after this.
No one does summer like we do. It's just a way of life. Light it up. Come close to me. Come feel the heat. Light it up. We're free. Come close to me. Together we light it up.
Our time is now. We own summer. We are alive.
Well, the contractor at the heart of a controversy surrounding 10 o'clock newscast, I would say, is a more fresher approach to news. While you have the same good, hard stories that would have been in the 7:30 newscast, you also have those stories that didn't make it to the 7:30. And another thing that we're doing differently is we have an entertainment section, so we have entertainment as well as sports. I like to call it, I guess, more well-rounded newscast that you definitely have to tune in at 10 p.m. to see.
Welcome back. Tonight's episode of On the Record, Arrest to Arraignment, Procedures and Protocols. Tonight we are really having a far-reaching discussion based on what has transpired with the arrest of former cabinet ministers and members of parliament. Should there be different treatment for men and women who would have served in government or who would have held high office? Should something be done differently when he or she is brought before the courts?
I don't think so. I think there should be one standard. The police need to have one standard, and that standard is if you get arrested, do it in decency and in order, but don't have a standard for the common man and then have a standard for the politician. No, make it one standard where we can have some consistency within the way that the police do things. Just don't change it because one set of people get locked up and then you change it for the other set of persons.
What I would say is this. The standard should be the law. Section 14 of the Criminal Procedure Code, which is in mandatory terms, says that the police shall use no more restraint than is necessary to prevent somebody escaping.
What is necessary?
The court. When you make an allegation that they have exceeded it, the court does. It is not one of those things where the police are given two choices to choose from. The court, the law says shall. There's authorities all the way back from 1850 that have been followed up to the day that talks about it, that talks about if you are charged with murder, you're treated differently than if you're charged with petty theft or white-collar crime. And whether you are a known violent criminal and whether you are not a known violent criminal.
Okay.
Your characteristics are only important when it says what could be reasonably foreseen.
Okay, so almost on a regular basis, the police are accused of all manner of inhumane treatment and brutality many times, and I know you would be a party to this. You have people going to court limping. You can see the physical signs of abuse.
Yeah.
The complaint is made, or something is said to the judge at the time, and the response from a public perspective is almost, okay, noted.
Yes.
And then we move on, and then nothing is ever said again publicly, or it is not raised in a tangible way, and it's business as usual.
But that's not true, because if there's abuse that impacts on abusive process, the law is that you will see that in the criminal process when people seek vindication in anything that you've gotten as a result. We then, it depends on what your lawyer does. If your lawyer doesn't seek vindication for your rights, so be it. The police beat one of my clients, charged him with armed robbery.
Yeah, but how does that protect me if my lawyer doesn't do it?
And I think he was granted over $90,000 as damages. You cannot assume that because somebody says the police beat them, that they were beaten. That is an allegation. Okay. That is an allegation that will be litigated in the criminal process and ought to also be litigated in the civil process to get money.
Right, and I hear that, but this continues to happen almost on a weekly basis. Somebody charged in court, I could show you, I turn on the TV and I could see someone limping, and I'd hear the reporter speak to how that issue was raised before the courts, and we're going, okay, so here we go again.
Yes.
Go ahead.
What I was saying, Mr. Mundi, the common man, some of them even can't afford to even pay an attorney to...
Which was my question.
Yes.
Who protects you if you don't know? If you don't
I'll
have
put
the
it
money?
to you like this. The guy who I got the 90-something thousand for, he did not pay me to start the civil case. As it turned out, his civil award made him able to afford
But is that
to
not
pay
the
for his
exception?
criminal defense.
Is it not the exception as opposed to the norm? And many people out there who just cannot afford it.
That is an argument for legal aid.
Okay,
But Mr. Money, you know, legal aid, they have so many other matters, right, to deal with, and sometimes they would not have the time to deal with these matters effectively.
No, they can't do civil matters. They can do criminal defense. There's an obligation on every lawyer to do legal aid. Some of us take it seriously, some of us don't.
Right, and again, that falls to
I
the
have always said that the three persons, well, the two people that lawyers should love, well, three people lawyers should love to sue are other lawyers because we have indemnity insurance, banks because they have money, and the government. Now, if you are saying that you have somebody who can come to me and say, look, I have been beaten, here is the facts, and you examine it, and I am satisfied that they have a case that is 60% better of success, it is in my interest to vindicate their right. And if lawyers aren't doing it generally, when you have a case where somebody has an entitlement to a remedy from the state in terms of money, and especially if it's a small man who will be struggling to pay your fee, it's in your own professional and commercial interest to vindicate that person's right, for that person to get some money from the state to help to defray the cost of their defense.
I hope folks are listening and paying attention so they know what recourse they have. If we can advance the discussion, you have attorneys, you have clergy, even party supporters, clergy, all the way as notable as Bishop Neil Ellis, have come out speaking about this treatment of government officials and calling it deplorable. You yourself have spoken out about this. Does this now, in part, begin to threaten the credibility of the law enforcement officers and the work that they're doing? Does it not speak to direct, I guess, lack of confidence in what the police are doing when you have such an outcry to say, hey, this is a witch hunt, or this shouldn't be happening, or this is inhumane treatment, when this is happening to people every day? But now again, we have a spotlight.
Let me say there's two things that arise. Firstly, I heard the Minister of National Security talk about they will not be deterred from their prosecutions. That's most unfortunate, because the political directorate, is not supposed to be in charge
the
of it.
General's office, or
no, it's supposed to be an independent commissioner of police. So when you respond to that, that's an issue. Now, the police will do, and former Chief Justice Hall and the present Chief Justice always says, bad policy is not law.
I agree with that.
And once you have a situation, once you go for vindication, this is how the law works. Once the law creates a cost for something, you could still do it so long as you're prepared to pay the cost. So once the law says it's inhumane to have 4 people in a cell, no bedding, then you have a choice to continue to pay people if you detain them like that, or fix it.
Where it is in the law, because me being a police officer for 25 years, I never saw that in law where they stated with the 4 persons in one cell.
That's a constitutional right not to be subject to cruel and inhumane treatment. There are authorities that we have lined up from the US, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand that speaks to the need for adequate bedding. The prison rules themselves required adequate bedding for everyone in the prison. And the prison
that
rules
doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't. And people,
and that's been going on for decades.
And people must seek relief. What you have is you've had 2 cases about the prison. I think one by the most recent, I believe, may have been by Fred Smith. But the objective there was to get a blanket declaration and not to get a particular remedy in terms of cash. I didn't have a bed, give me some cash.
Okay, Maria.
Yeah, Mr. Monroe, according to Article 17 of the Constitution, no person should be subjected to torture or inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment. Okay, with these politicians, what I need to find out what degrading treatment they had experienced from what we've seen in the public. I cite like how Mr. Gibson was walked from the station to the courts. A lot of persons were saying that was degrading.
Well, I can help you with that quickly. The Old Bailey in England was built in 1900.
Right.
Our magistrates court has a similar setup. It has a cell block.
Right.
That you're supposed to drive people into, politicians and individuals who aren't politicians alike, which includes the lawyers you charge, the small man you charge, the small woman you charge, the building which we paid for at great expense, then have corridors that permit accused persons to be carried into the court without ever being seen. The Universal Declaration
but we don't have that
of
here, Mr. Monroe.
Mr. Monroe,
Yeah, that's how the magistrate's court is set up
but
presently.
every person, as far as I understand it, will make that walk. And even, you talk about the cameras, but the police officers will notify the media when everybody is coming to court, whether it's the murderer or whoever.
I agree. And you have case law on it that says that you probably owe all of these people some money. And if you have to pay them, you will stop doing it. And I repeat.
So what should happen? People should just be shuttled into court and no one should know?
How the building is designed is the same way that you have arraignments everywhere. You should be driven into the cell block of the magistrate's court. From the cell block of the magistrate's court, you're conveyed to the courts through the tunnels.
So,
the only court in which there would be an ability for that to happen is the Supreme Court, where the holding cells at Central isn't in the same
What
building.
you're advocating then is that we take people who are accused of crimes into court without being seen.
Well, what I'm advocating is that you follow the law. You
Okay,
pay.
okay.
You could choose to still do it.
No, but then from a public's perspective, if you're taking someone who's accused of a crime to court, shouldn't the public have a right to see that and to know what's happening?
Based on what?
Pardon?
Based on
If
what?
this is a violent offender, if this person has done something that's in contravention of the law, posing a risk,
And so the presumption of innocence goes, and when you see the articles in the US, in the UK, all over the world,
it happens all in the world,
what
Mr.
you're
Monroe.
saying-
When someone is charged before the court for a crime, people are made aware of
Well,
that.
Jerome, if you call it a perp walk, right, which is what it's called, what is the assumption there that this is a perpetrator? And so when you read the judgments of the court, they're directed towards that. I'm not saying that the press and the police can't continue to have their perp walks,
But don't do it for certain people.
No, I'm just saying you have to pay the people whose rights you offend.
Mr. Monroe.
That's all. If you're really,
Mr. Monroe,
I'll give you an example.
That's an interesting argument.
If the court says the level of damages is $10,000,
So we should pay $10,000 to everybody who parade?
figure, right?
Okay.
Well, this is how
But
the
they have
case-
other countries, Mr. Monroe, where they had politicians and prime ministers, them that was arrested, went to jail, handcuffed, marched from one place to the next. They was pictured, Mr. Monroe, and I just print off an article yesterday, 20 of them, corrupt leaders.
Which country?
Several countries, one in Nigeria was one of them. Also, there were several other Commonwealth countries.
Did they have a court building built like
I don't know that, Mr.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're at the point of our break. We can examine that particular aspect in depth at some other time, but we're going to take a break. We will be back with more On the Record right after this.
Speeds for free when you get TV, internet, and phone. Ask for Trio from Rev.
Rev, join the revolution.
Get the HD Cinemax experience anywhere, anytime, and any way you want with the Cinemax Go app. Free to all Rev TV subscribers. To start watching on your laptop, sign up at cablebahamas.com/myaccount. Then visit cinemaxgoca.com. To watch Cinemax Go on your mobile device, just download the app from the Bahamas iOS App Store or Google Play Store. Launch the app, select Bahamas as your country, follow the prompts, choose Rev, and sign in with your Rev My Account credentials. Now, you can enjoy unlimited access to over 300 movies updated every month with Cinemax Go from Rev.
Rev, join the revolution.
Welcome back to On the Record. This is our final segment of this episode. Our topic for tonight, arrest or arraignment procedures and protocols. If you've been watching the show and following, you certainly know where we are with this discussion. But Mr. Munro, you had indicated earlier in the press that you were equipped with a list of names of FNMs who had allegedly been involved in some nefarious activities and to your knowledge involved in corruption. You later came out and said you were apprehensive about giving that to the police. Why? Or giving that information?
This is an amazing thing that happens here. I was having a conversation with a reporter about issues generally. And my comment was, if you are going to lower the standard, then these matters fall within that standard. And if you're going to charge indictably, which leaves no time period, you could go back to when King Hammer was a hatchet, then this would be captured. And then I saw 3 matters. I form a view of what motivates it. I have determined the best way to go about it. And none of this is precedent setting in this country. You know, my friend Rodney Montcalvis says he's 60 and so he knows. Well, I'm my age and I have seen a sitting prime minister privately prosecuted by the present Attorney General, Carl Bethel, QC, on behalf of the present Minister of Labour, Dion Fowkes. And I have seen the questioning of the people, the 2 people I have been involved in. I have seen the basis of it. I don't intend to condescend to the merits of the matters because they're live before the court. But, you know, if we are correct and there is a motivation, then it is correct that you should encompass everything. If you look, for instance, at Pakistan, when you lower the standard, everyone is constantly under investigation. They had the thing about the sitting prime minister, and now Omar Sharif is under investigation, and every living politician in Pakistan, in Brazil, is being pursued.
But Mr.
If we say we want even-handed treatment, then we will have even-handed treatment.
What the Bahamian people have a problem with, Mr. Monroe, is that this former administration, they tax the Bahamian people, right? And when they tax the Bahamian people, what the issue is that the money, some of the monies are not accounted for. And that is the big issue. Not only that, Mr. Monroe.
But that's not what is the subject of any of these prosecutions.
Mr. Monroe.
That's actually not the subject of any
Mr.
prosecution.
Monroe, yes, Mr.
And
Monroe.
It does speak to the optics of all of this.
The money came out of the Treasury. The monies, what they were talking about, came out of the Treasury. It was the people's money. Any money in the Treasury, Mr. Monroe, is the people's money. And you know what is so shocking, Mr. Monroe? Yes, they said that you said that you have 6 FNMs who did this.
Now, at that point, it was 6 based on what people were saying, which is the basis of the present.
Or what?
Up a bit now.
It's more now.
Watch this, Mr. Monroe.
So go ahead, I'll let you finish, and I'll go with my question.
The Bahamian people and tell you this. Some of these same set of PLP politician names that are coming up now was under investigation from 10 years ago, sir. Under the former Mr. Ingram administration, there was a special unit, Mr. Monroe, who was established to investigate 6 of these same PLP politicians. I want to ask Mr. Greenside, where's the files? I was a part of that investigation.
I never saw you in the interviews.
No, because Mr. Monroe, they had the special investigators doing that. Why?
There was SIB in the little buildings just to the south of the post office.
And guess what, Mr. Monroe?
I've been at this for a little while, you know.
I know, hold on. And Mr. Monroe, who was there, sir? Who was there? My friend, you know my friend, Jennifer Bowe, who's deceased now.
No, I didn't see her there.
I know. Because the majority of persons, the police officers them put there to investigate that, were all PLP supporters, sir. The persons who they put in there, sir, had no fraud investigation experience.
That's not true.
Yes, Mr. Monroe.
A lot of this made
no,
the news
Mr.
at
Monroe.
the time, you know,
No,
with
Mr. Monroe.
Edward Penn and the NEMA situation
And by the way, who was
out of
investigating?
Grand Bahama.
Yes,
And
Mr. Monroe.
But so it
And
does
some
beg
of-
the
and
question
some-
then.
and some
Well,
of
no,
it
it does.
went
It
to
does. It
trial.
does beg the question. If these investigations were taking place previously,
Thank you.
why is it that there were no prosecutions?
There's
to
an
that?
obvious reason.
Why?
Which is
The thing that Bahamian people fail to grasp is if a minister signs a contract for you, you don't have a contract. As I say, I don't want to get into the merits
No,
of
Mr.
these cases.
What do you mean you don't have a contract?
The person who validates contracts is a permanent secretary.
Ah, okay.
The Minister of Finance could tell the cows come home, you're getting paid.
But Mr. Monroe, you know
Until
for
a
the fact
particular person signs,
that
that's
they
not
were
it.
doing these things behind
So
closed
again,
doors.
back to my question:
Yes.
Why? Because of that technicality, no one was
no,
there.
you
So
had
why is it that no one?
investigations that
So nothing
if-
ever came out of these
no,
investigations.
They investigate. I could accuse Jerome Sawyer of stealing my phones. It could be
No, Mr. Monroe.
investigated. If there is no merit, there is no merit.
Mr. Monroe.
So there was no merit in
None
No,
whatsoever.
any of
Mr.
these cases
Monroe?
previously.
And what you will find,
No, I disagree with
what
Mr.
you
Monroe.
will find, because what Ms. Daxon may not be aware of is that I didn't just start doing
Okay.
this for people now.
I understand.
And what you will have is when you have somebody saying that goods were delivered, 2 people on the ground signed off for it. And you talk to those 2 people on the ground and they say, well, this is where it went. You have a lot of complaints. We have seen this. We've seen a cabinet minister get up in Parliament and say that one of my clients in Grand Bahama never built a seawall, and that is outrageous, when the fact is that that contractor built every seawall in Grand Bahama that the government built 3 when he was in cabinet, and Kwesi Thompson, one of his colleagues, was the lawyer. And so Bahamian people must understand it's very easy to make allegations.
Mr. Monroe.
Thus far, there's not been much defamation litigation.
So go ahead. I'll let
Okay.
you and then ask my 2 questions.
What I want to say to you, Mr. Monroe, it ain't that these persons did not commit the crime, you know. It's who the Commissioner of Police choose to investigate these crimes. And if you have somebody, there's fraud investigation that is going on, why would you choose somebody who work in traffic to come and investigate a fraud matter, Mr.
I
Monroe?
wasn't the investigator.
Yes,
I
Mr.
can
Monroe,
tell you,
I'm
Ms.
going to tell you,
Thompson,
Mr.
I have
Monroe.
been called to the bar from 1990.
So, okay.
All of the gentlemen I encountered, I encountered not only in that police force, but I encountered in
So
seminars
again, my
I
question
attended.
is,
No.
what makes these instances so different this time around? If as we say, the investigations like this have been ongoing.
Yes.
But
They have not been ongoing. You've
well,
had complaints
in the
during
past.
one emergency circumstance that was thoroughly investigated, and that was it. What will be the difference, Jerome, and you cannot get into the merits
Right,
of the matter,
exactly.
is that from one side, you may have somebody determined to proceed with unmeritorious prosecutions.
So
That is one answer to it.
From one side, you mean from one political side?
I'm constrained not to condescend to the merits.
Okay.
But it is very interesting when you hear people talking about FNM police, PLP police. The era of this government is the UN set out quite clearly how you set out anti-corruption.
But Mr. Monroe, we live in a very small society.
Thank you.
People choose political sides and make that very known publicly all the time.
Jerome.
The police force
Yes.
is no different.
Yes,
Jerome,
Mr.
I mean, you talk about
Monroe,
FNM and
yes.
PLP
Jerome.
police
Yes,
officers.
Mr.
I think that's
Monroe.
throughout our country.
Yes, Mr.
And
Monroe.
Jerome,
That's
you know,
not just on the police force.
Everybody
and you know
knows.
the funny thing about it? If you look at the UN things, that's online as well, so people can look at it. When people
Monroe, you're
say
missing the point.
things like that, they don't understand
No,
the
Mr.
impact
Monroe.
of it.
No, you're
When
missing the
you
point.
say this goes across the society,
You're missing the
if
point.
you decide to send someone for a jury trial, what in fact do you say?
Mr. Monroe?
Because it is very interesting if and when you arrive at that point, you might find that statement of fact is deleterious there actually being a jury trial. And again, we think we reinvent things in the Bahamas. We don't invent this. If we look to our cousins in the South, we will see how the English dealt with it, and the English House of Lords judges are also the final judges.
But how do you compare, and I speak from a position where I always say that we live in a global society, and whatever we do in the Bahamas is certainly no different from anywhere else. But how do you, I guess, justify when you have a country of millions of people, and we can't even push 500,000 in terms of population?
No, it's not millions. The country I'm talking about the Turks and Caicos.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, you're talking about the UK and...
No. They had, and in the UK it might be slightly different. What is distressing me in all of this is what people don't grasp is if these are jury trials, and if you say we are fractured on party lines, and if you say it is national and easily identifiable, how are you going to satisfy the threshold of sitting an impartial jury? I know how the English dealt with it in the Turks and Caicos. I have seen judgments that speak to what do you do when you find that the UN, to avoid this sort of thing in small island states, and other countries, knowing that corruption charges may have a political aspect, set out how you set up the courts. And I think in this instance, we may have fatally put the cart before the horse.
So you're saying that these former these former cabinet ministers do not have, or will not have a fair trial?
No, I'm not saying.
So what?
I am saying we claim to be concerned in setting up anti-corruption mechanisms. I think I heard the Minister of Education say that. We use the internet to find a lot of things. People need to use the internet to find what the UN says should be the characteristics of it. And people should use the internet to read cases like the one with Michael Mizik from
Yes,
PCI.
that is one of the cases. You know what they need to do, Mr. Monroe? Whether the money was in the Treasury, how did they get the money? Did they have the authority to get these funds, right? And why did they get it?
Well, I don't think you have a grasp of what the allegations are.
No, Mr. Monroe. Mr. Monroe is all about
public funds work.
Yes, so, Mr. Monroe is all about bribery, and these persons then were in public office, and they were getting some other stuff. And like I am saying to the Bahamian, is nothing new underneath the sun. But the investigation was there, and not only that, Mr. Monroe, not one person got charged about 6-7 years ago when the police had the file. I am telling you, I used to work in commercial crime. The evidence was there. Yes, Mr. Monroe.
The
special unit.
Well, I think that deserves another show, another investigation. But getting back to my initial question, that these aren't new issues.
Thank you.
These aren't things that just would have arisen in the past 2 months, 6 months, a year.
What are these?
These concerns that you have, you saying putting the cart before the horse, etc., and how the courts are set up, etc. But why now? And that is the question on the minds of a lot of people. There's a lot
of PLP want special privileges.
The FNM came to power and they said they would set up corruption mechanisms.
Special privileges.
Okay. The reality of it is, and Ms. Daxon is a lawyer, so she should know.
Yes.
The law governs it. Magna Carta is the start, and the law applies to all citizens equally. And so, for instance, there was a trial that the Court of Appeal found that publicity vitiated a conviction.
But why now, Mr. Monroe?
We have to be mindful of everything. We have had before trials where these same issues were raised. Like Mr. Monka says, he's 60. I've been in this game. You can read the law. You have to govern yourself by the law. This government claims it is doing something for the first time. That isn't really accurate. But if you claim you're doing something for the first time, What is the validity of your question?
We are running out at the end
you
of
see
our
my
show.
point, Jerome?
I
It
see your
never
point.
happened before.
I see your point.
And your question is how come nobody has ever raised this before for something that's never happened before?
Okay, so as we close out the show, I'm going to start with you, Mr. Monroe. Given the opportunity to right these wrongs and correct what is happening, what would you do differently, or what advice would you give government in how to handle these matters?
Well, as I said, the cart was put before the horse, and one could see the way the English approach it in TCI, a small country, similar issues of supposed systemic governmental corruption. You have to be honest. I'm not sure that there's a degree of honesty with the Bahamian public. What you have to do is you must design a system that can withstand scrutiny and that's compliant with the laws. If you do not do that, then you may find yourself frustrated and not being able to get to point A. The bottom line is the UN gives us a clear roadmap. The English and TCI gave us a clear roadmap. It's like a lot of things in the Bahamas where, I've said this before, the Americans, where the English adopted our death penalty jurisprudence from, gave us a clear roadmap of how you crack the conundrum. We just seem to want to be emotional and not practical.
Okay, Maria Daxon, I'll give you the last word on the show.
Okay, Mr. Monroe, I understand everything that you are saying. What the Bahamian people have an issue with is like now, right? If none of these former PLP politicians would have not gotten arrested and charged and marched before the court, this issue would have never came up.
Your lawyer should have raised it.
No, it would have never came up.
Your lawyer should have raised it when it happened to you.
No, Mr. Monroe, because why? I understand.
Final words.
Yeah, there's a standard. And we shouldn't have to change the standard now because these politicians are locked up now and charged before the courts. Let the law take its course, like you say. If the police force have a standard, when you get arrested for any criminal matters, you're to get handcuffed, you're to go to court, you have to just accept that and move on, Mr. Monroe. Don't change it now just for certain set of people. I went through it. So I understand some stuff. The common man have to go through it. We lock up people for defrauding somebody for $10. They have to get handcuffed. Why special treatment now?
Folks, with that, we are out of time. First of all, I want to thank you for coming on and helping to bring some perspective to this, which is obviously a very hot issue right now, and certainly has evoked a lot of emotions in a lot of people. And I think continues to show in many ways that the country is still divided along political lines because it depends on who you ask or what the reaction is. It is a matter of law at the end of the day. Thank you very much for clarifying that. We hope that you have enjoyed tonight's show. A very special thank you to Maria Daxon and Attorney Wayne Monroe, Attorney Maria Daxon as well, my producer, technical staff, and of course you, the audience, for watching tonight. Be sure and join us next week on The Record, same time, same place. Once again, I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. We'll see you next time.